The garage light flickered above my head as I twisted the wrench one more time, tightening the bolt on my truck's engine. 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and here I was, James Mitchell, 42 years old, fixing what should have been fixed years ago. Story of my life, really. Always patching things up that other people broke. My phone buzzed against the workbench, vibrating like an angry wasp. I wiped my greasy hands on an old rag and picked it up. Text message from Beth, my wife of 18 years. She was in Los Angeles for some corporate training seminar, living it up in a world I'd never understand. I want an open marriage. This isn't negotiable. We'll discuss terms when I get back. I stared at the screen for a full minute, reading those words over and over. No explanation, no apology. Just a demand served up like she was ordering coffee. I typed back one word. Understood. Then I set the phone down and laughed. Not the happy kind of laugh you hear at family barbecues, or when your kid scores a goal. This was the kind of laugh that comes when you realize you've been playing checkers while everyone else was playing chess. I walked through our house, my house, really, since I'd built most of it with my own hands. The silence felt different now. Not peaceful, like it used to be after a long day running Mitchell Electric. This was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. Our daughters, Becca and Brielle, were staying at my mother's place for the week, 17 and 15, both of them athletes, both smart enough to sense when their parents were heading for trouble. They'd been spending more time away from home lately, and now I understood why. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking at family photos on the wall. Beth's smile looked different in every picture from the last 2 years. Distant, like she was already somewhere else, planning her escape. The corporate job had changed her. 6 months ago, she'd been working part-time at the local insurance office, complaining about being bored. Then her college friend Candace recommended her for some marketing position at a firm 2 towns over. Suddenly, Beth was wearing expensive clothes, talking about synergy and leveraging opportunities, staying late for meetings I was never invited to hear about. I should have seen this coming. The signs were all there, bright as neon. Late nights, secretive phone calls, new passwords on everything. But I'd been busy keeping my electrical contracting business afloat, dealing with supply chain issues and customers who thought they could wire their own houses after watching YouTube videos. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from our joint bank account. Beth had withdrawn $800 from an ATM in Los Angeles, at midnight her time. Interesting. I opened my laptop and started going through our accounts. Credit cards, savings, checking, the business accounts. Beth had been busy. Small withdrawals here and there, nothing that would trigger alerts, but it added up. Over the past 3 months, she'd moved nearly $15,000 into an account I'd never seen before. The woman was planning her exit strategy, and she'd been working on it for months. I leaned back in my chair and thought about my options. I could play the victim, beg her to reconsider, maybe suggest counseling. That's what the old James would have done. The James who believed that hard work and loyalty meant something. The James who thought his wife respected him enough to have an honest conversation before blowing up their lives. But that James was apparently an idiot. I spent the next hour changing passwords, transferring funds, and making phone calls to banks. By 3 in the morning, Beth's access to our joint accounts was history. Her credit cards were canceled. Her name was removed from the house deed. Something I could do since I'd inherited the property from my father and built the house myself. If Beth wanted to play hardball, she'd learn that small-town electricians know a thing or two about cutting off power. I was about to head to bed when I heard a car door slam outside. Through the kitchen window, I saw my brother John's beat-up Camaro parked in our driveway. He was stumbling toward his car, adjusting his shirt like he'd put it on in a hurry. John lived 6 miles away, in the opposite direction from any place he'd have business being at 3 in the morning. Unless his business was in my house, with my wife who was supposed to be in Los Angeles. I watched him drive away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Then I walked upstairs to the master bedroom and found what I was looking for. Beth's laptop, hidden under a pile of magazines on her nightstand. She'd been in such a hurry to leave for her business trip that she'd forgotten to take it. The password was easy enough, our anniversary date, backwards. Beth never was creative with security. Her email told the whole story. Messages going back 4 months, starting professional and friendly, then getting personal, then getting explicit. Not with some stranger she'd met at work, with John, my own brother. The affair had been going on since February, right around the time Beth started her new job. started dressing differently, started looking at me like I was furniture she was tired of seeing. I read every message, every plan they'd made, every lie they'd told. They'd been meeting at the Riverside Motel on Highway 9, the kind of place that rents rooms by the hour. They'd talked about how to handle the James situation when the time came. Beth had even joked about how I was too dense to figure it out. That last part stung more than it should have. I printed out the most damaging messages and saved copies to a flash drive. Then I deleted Beth's browser history and closed the laptop, leaving everything exactly as I'd found it. By the time the sun came up, I had a plan. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about the last 18 years. Beth and I had met in college, got married young, built what I thought was a good life together. I'd worked my tail off to give her everything she wanted. The house, the cars, vacations we couldn't really afford. I'd supported her when she wanted to stay home with the girls. Supported her when she wanted to go back to work. Supported her through her mother's long illness and her father's drinking problem. Apparently, support wasn't enough. At 7 in the morning, I called my office manager, Rita, and told her I'd be taking a few personal days. Rita had worked for my father before me and knew better than to ask questions when a Mitchell man needed time to handle family business. Then I drove to Ray's boxing gym on the south side of town. Ray Kowalski had trained me when I was a teenager, back when I thought I might make something of myself in the ring. These days, the gym was more social club than training facility, a place where middle-aged men came to hit heavy bags and pretend they were still tough. Ray was sweeping up when I walked in, his gray hair tied back in a ponytail that made him look like an aging rock star. He took one look at my face and pointed toward the back office. "Coffee's fresh," he said. "You look like you need it." I told him everything. Ray listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his weathered face giving nothing away. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and lit a cigarette, despite the no-smoking signs his wife had put up everywhere. "So what are you going to do about it?" he asked. "I don't know yet." "Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it out loud." Ray blew smoke toward the ceiling. "Question is, you going to handle this like a man or like a victim? What's the difference? Victims complain. Men take action." I spent an hour at the gym, working the heavy bag until my knuckles were raw and my shirt was soaked with sweat. Physical activity helped me think, always had. By the time I left, I knew exactly what I was going to do. First stop was the Riverside Motel. I'd driven past it 1,000 times, but never really looked at it. 2 stories of faded brick and broken dreams, the kind of place where people went to make mistakes they'd regret later. The parking lot was mostly empty, except for a few cars that looked like they'd been abandoned. I parked across the street and waited. At noon, John's Camaro pulled into the lot. 5 minutes later, a silver sedan I recognized as Beth's rental car followed. They'd gotten sloppy, or maybe they just didn't care anymore. They went into room 237 on the second floor. I could see them through the window, silhouettes moving around, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly, more like disappointment. I'd expected better from both of them. I waited until they were settled, then walked over to John's car. The doors were unlocked. John never was the careful type. I popped the hood and removed a few essential components. Nothing that would cause an accident, but enough to make sure the car wasn't going anywhere soon. Then I took out a can of shaving cream I'd brought for exactly this purpose and decorated the windshield with a simple message. "Cheater." On the driver's seat, I left a note. "Enjoy the ride, brother. Hope it's worth it." Then I walked back to my truck and drove home to wait for the fireworks. They didn't disappoint. My phone started ringing at 2:30. First John, screaming about vandalism and threatening to call the police. Then Beth, her voice shaking with rage, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. "Just having some fun," I told her. "Isn't that what an open marriage is about? Fun?" "You can't just destroy other people's property, James. That's illegal. So is adultery in some states. But hey, who's keeping track?" She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, she called back, her tone completely different. Now she was trying to be reasonable, suggesting we work through this like adults. "I'm willing to work through it," I said. "But first, you need to come home. We should probably have this conversation in person, don't you think?" "I'm still in Los Angeles, James. The seminar doesn't end until Friday." "Funny thing about that," I said. "I called your hotel this morning. They said you checked out yesterday. So either you're lying to me, or someone stole your credit card and is using it at motels in our hometown." Should I call the police and report the fraud? Silence on the other end. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much I was guessing. We'll talk when I get home, she finally said. Yes, I agreed. We will. After she hung up, I went upstairs and started packing her things. Not angrily, not vindictively, just methodically moving her clothes and personal items into boxes. If Beth wanted out of our marriage, I wasn't going to make her stay. But she wasn't going to make me the villain in her story, either. I was folding her sweaters when I found the burner phone hidden in her dresser drawer. It was an old flip phone, the kind you buy with cash at gas stations. The call history showed dozens of conversations with John, but also with numbers I didn't recognize. One number came up frequently, with calls lasting hours at a time. I dialed it from my own phone, and a familiar voice answered on the second ring. Candace Morrison speaking. Candace. Beth's college friend, the one who'd recommended her for the corporate job, the one who'd been so supportive of Beth's personal growth and finding herself. I hung up without saying anything, but the pieces were starting to fit together. This wasn't just about Beth and John having an affair. This was bigger, more organized. Candace was involved somehow, pulling strings I was just beginning to see. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing research. Candace Morrison, age 39, marketing director at Pinnacle Solutions. Divorced, no kids, lived in a condo downtown. According to her social media profiles, she was all about empowering women and breaking free from toxic relationships. Interesting philosophy for someone who was helping to destroy mine. By evening, I had a clearer picture of what I was dealing with. This wasn't just my wife having a midlife crisis. This was a coordinated campaign, with Candace as the strategist and John as the convenient local option for Beth's rebellion. They thought they were so smart, planning their little revolution behind my back. They'd underestimated the small-town electrician, figured I'd just roll over and accept whatever scraps they decided to throw me. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Beth came home Thursday evening, 3 hours after her flight landed. She walked into our kitchen like she owned the place, which I suppose she thought she did. Her hair was different, shorter, more styled, and she was wearing clothes I'd never seen before. The corporate makeover was complete. "We need to talk," she said, setting her purse on the counter like this was just another business meeting. I figured, coffee? She looked surprised by my calm tone. Sure. I poured 2 cups and sat across from her at the table, where we'd shared thousands of meals, helped our daughters with homework, planned family vacations that seemed like they'd happened in someone else's life. "I know you're upset," Beth began, "but I think if we approach this maturely, I know about John." The words hung in the air between us. Beth's face went through several expressions: surprise, denial, calculations, before settling on defiance. "I figured you might. You were always observant." Was I? Because I apparently missed 4 months of my wife screwing my brother. "Don't be crude, James. This is hard enough already." I laughed, and she flinched. "Hard for who? You? You're not the one who just found out your marriage was a joke. Our marriage has been over for years. We both know that." "No, Beth. You decided it was over. I was still trying to make it work." She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "People grow apart, James. It happens. We want different things now." "What do you want?" "Freedom, adventure, a chance to be someone other than James Mitchell's wife in this tiny town." "And John gives you that?" Her laugh was bitter. "John is just convenient. This isn't about him." "Then what's it about? Candace?" Beth's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected me to know about her friend's involvement. "Candace helped me see that I was settling, that I deserved better than spending my life watching you fix other people's problems while ignoring our own." "What problems, Beth? We have a good life, a nice house, healthy kids, a business that pays the bills. What exactly were you missing?" "Everything." The mask slipped, and for a moment I saw real emotion. "I was missing everything, James. Excitement, passion, feeling like I mattered. When was the last time you looked at me like I was beautiful? When was the last time we did anything spontaneous? When was the last time you gave me a chance to? You've been planning your escape for months." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard I'd spent years landscaping. "I want a divorce, James. A clean, simple divorce. We split everything 50-50, share custody of the girls, and move on with our lives. 50-50. I kept my voice level. "You mean you want half of everything I built while you were planning to leave me? I contributed to this marriage too, by having an affair with my brother? By lying to me for months? By stealing money from our accounts to fund your new lifestyle? She turned around, and now she looked genuinely shocked. You went through our finances? Our finances, Beth. They're half mine, remember? Just like you want everything else to be. You can't just cut me off from our money. I have rights. So do I. And one of those rights is not to finance my wife's adultery. We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I realized this was the most honest conversation we'd had in years. No pretending, no politeness, just two people who'd built a life together watching it fall apart. I'm staying at Candace's tonight, Beth said finally. We can discuss the details through lawyers. Actually, you're not. Excuse me. Candace's condo flooded this afternoon. Burst pipe on the floor above her. She's staying at a hotel until it's fixed. I smiled. I heard it through the contractor network. Small town. You know how word spreads. Beth stared at me. You didn't. I'm an electrician, Beth. I know a lot of plumbers. And sometimes pipes just burst, especially old ones that haven't been properly maintained. That's sabotage. That's life in an old building. These things happen. I stood up and walked to the counter, refilling my coffee cup. There's a motel on Highway 9 that might have rooms available. I hear it's popular with people looking for privacy. Her face flushed red. You're being petty, James. I'm being practical. You want out of our marriage? Fine. But you don't get to destroy it on your terms while I stand by and watch. This is my house, Beth. I built it. If you want to leave, leave. But you don't get to take everything with you. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over. No, I agreed. It's not. After she left, I sat in my kitchen and thought about what came next. Beth would go to John's place, probably spend the night there. Tomorrow she'd start calling lawyers, trying to figure out how to get her hands on half of everything I'd worked for, but I had advantages she didn't know about. This was a small town, and I'd lived here my whole life. I knew everyone, and everyone knew me. The Mitchell family had been part of this community for 3 generations. We had roots, reputation, connections. Beth was about to learn the difference between being from somewhere and just living there. I spent the evening making phone calls, not to lawyers or private investigators, but to friends, neighbors, customers, people who'd known me since I was a kid. I didn't tell them everything, just enough to let them know that Beth and I were having problems, that she'd been spending time with people who didn't have the family's best interests at heart. In a small town, information travels faster than gossip, and gossip travels at the speed of light. By morning, half the town would know that Beth Mitchell was stepping out on her husband with his own brother. The other half would know by noon. Beth wanted freedom? She was about to get more attention than she'd ever dreamed of. Friday morning brought the first consequences. I was having coffee at Murphy's Diner when Linda Murphy herself came over to my table, concern written all over her face. James, honey, I hope you know that not everyone in town thinks badly of you for what's happening. What's happening, Linda? She looked uncomfortable. Well, you know, the situation with Beth and, well, with John. I nodded gravely. It's been difficult, but I appreciate your support. If there's anything Tom and I can do, you just let us know. You're good people, James. Always have been. Similar conversations happened throughout the day. At the hardware store, the gas station, the bank. People I'd known for years, making a point to tell me they were on my side, that they thought Beth was making a mistake. By afternoon, my phone was ringing constantly. Customers calling to check on pending jobs, making sure my personal problems wouldn't affect their work. I assured everyone that Mitchell Electric would continue to provide the same reliable service it always had. What I didn't mention was that 3 of those customers had specifically asked me not to bring John on any jobs at their properties. Word was spreading faster than I'd expected. John called me around 4 o'clock, his voice tight with anger. What did you do, James? I'm not sure what you mean. Everyone in town is looking at me like I've got some disease. Mrs. Patterson canceled the job I was supposed to start Monday. Said she didn't feel comfortable having me around. That's unfortunate. Cut the crap. You've been talking to people, haven't you? Spreading stories. I haven't told anyone anything that isn't true, John. If people are drawing their own conclusions, that's their choice. We're brothers, James. This is between you and Beth. Leave me out of it. You left yourself out of it when you started sleeping with my wife. He hung up on me, but I knew he'd call back. John had always been the type who needed to have the last word, especially when he was in the wrong. That evening, I drove over to my mother's house to see the girls. Mom lived in the same house where John and I had grown up, a modest 2-story on Elm Street that she'd maintained perfectly despite being 73 years old. Becca and Brielle were in the living room doing homework when I arrived. Both of them looked up when I walked in, their expressions carefully neutral. They knew something was wrong. Kids always know. But they were waiting for me to explain. "How's Mom treating you?" I asked, settling into Dad's old recliner. "Like we're made of glass," Brielle said. She was the younger one, but usually the more direct. "She keeps making our favorite foods and asking if we want to talk about anything." "Do you want to talk about anything?" The girls exchanged glances. Becca, the older one, spoke first. "Some kids at school were saying things. About you and Mom." "What kind of things?" "That you're getting divorced. That Mom's dating Uncle John." Becca's voice was steady, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. I took a deep breath. This was the conversation I'd been dreading, but it had to happen. "Your mother and I are having some problems. Serious problems. We're probably going to separate for a while." "Because of Uncle John?" Brielle asked. "That's part of it, but it's more complicated than that." "Is it our fault?" Becca's question was barely above a whisper. "No, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. Sometimes adults make bad choices, and other adults have to deal with the consequences. That's what's happening here." We talked for another hour, and I tried to answer their questions honestly, without sharing details they didn't need to know. They were smart kids, and they deserved better than lies or false reassurances. When I was leaving, Mom walked me to the door. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I've been better." "Huh, John came by yesterday. He seemed upset." "I imagine he was." Mom studied my face. "You're planning something, aren't you?" "I'm planning to protect what's mine. Be careful, James. Revenge has a way of hurting everyone involved." "This isn't revenge, Mom. It's justice." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue. Mom had been married to my father for 45 years before he passed. She understood that sometimes a man had to take a stand. Saturday morning brought a new development. Beth showed up at the house with a locksmith, demanding to be let in to get more of her belongings. "This is still my home, James. You can't keep me out." "Actually, I can." I handed her a folded paper. "Restraining order. Temporary. But it keeps you away from the house until we can sort this out legally." She read the document, her face growing redder with each line. "Domestic violence. James, you've never laid a hand on me." "No, but you've been stealing from our joint accounts, harassing me with demands for money, and making threats about what you'll do if I don't cooperate with your divorce terms." The judge felt that constituted a pattern of financial and emotional abuse. "This is ridiculous. No one will believe this." Judge Harrison believed it. That's all that matters. The locksmith looked uncomfortable, caught between a husband and wife having a very public argument in their driveway. Several neighbors had found reasons to be outside, watering plants or checking their mail. "I'll fight this," Beth said. "I'm sure you will. But until then, you'll need to stay somewhere else." She stalked back to her car, the locksmith following uncertainly. I could see her on her phone before she'd even pulled out of the driveway, probably calling Candace or a lawyer or both. That afternoon, I got a call from Ray at the gym. "You might want to get down here," he said. "Your brother's here, and he's been drinking." I found John at the bar in the back of Ray's gym, 3 empty beer bottles in front of him and a fourth in his hand. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes red and unfocused. "There he is," John slurred. "The righteous James Mitchell. Come to gloat? Come to make sure you get home safely." "Home?" John laughed bitterly. "You mean the apartment I might not be able to afford next month because you've been sabotaging my work?" "Your work was sabotaging itself, John. I just stopped covering for you." "I am your brother. You were my brother. Brothers don't sleep with each other's wives." John stood up unsteadily, and for a moment I thought he might take a swing at me. But Ray appeared behind the bar, a baseball bat in his hands, and John thought better of it. "This isn't over," John said, echoing Beth's words from earlier in the week. "Yes, it is," I replied. "You just don't know it yet." After John left, Ray poured me a beer, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while. "You know," Ray finally said, "I've seen a lot of men go through situations like this. Most of them handle it one of two ways. They either fall apart or they get mean. You're doing something different." "What's that?" "You're getting smart, but smart can be dangerous if you're not careful." "I'm being careful." "Are you?" "Because, from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're playing a game that could blow up in your face." I finished my beer and stood up. "Then I better make sure I win." The final confrontation came on a Saturday morning in late October at the annual Founders' Day festival in the town square. I hadn't planned it that way, but sometimes life provides the perfect stage for the scenes that matter most. I was working the Mitchell Electric booth, handing out promotional materials and talking to potential customers, when Beth arrived with Candace and John. They made quite a picture. Beth in her new corporate clothes, Candace in designer everything, and John trying to look confident despite the fact that half the town was staring at them. They set up at a table across the square, ostensibly helping with Candace's company's community outreach program. Really, they were making a statement, showing everyone that they weren't ashamed, that they were moving forward with their lives regardless of what small-minded people might think. The festival was crowded, families enjoying the last warm weekend before winter set in. Local businesses had booths. There was a small stage for music and announcements, and the whole thing had a Norman Rockwell feel that made what happened next even more dramatic. Around noon, Mayor Davidson took the microphone to thank the sponsors and make the usual community announcements. When he finished, he asked if anyone else had anything to share with the community. I raised my hand. "James Mitchell has something to say," the mayor announced, gesturing for me to come forward. I walked to the stage, aware that every eye in the square was on me. Beth looked confused, Candace looked suspicious, and John looked like he wanted to run. "Thanks, Mayor Davidson." I took the microphone and looked out at the crowd. Neighbors, customers, people I'd known my entire life. I wanted to take this opportunity to clear up some rumors that have been circulating around town. The square went quiet. Even the kids stopped running around to listen. As most of you know, my wife Beth and I are going through a difficult time. Some of you might have heard that she's been seeing someone else, and I want to confirm that those rumors are true. A murmur went through the crowd. This wasn't the kind of thing people usually discussed at community events. What you might not know is that the someone else is my brother John, and that they've been conducting their relationship with the help and encouragement of Beth's friend Candace Morrison. The murmur became a buzz. People were turning to look at Beth's table, where all three of them were standing frozen. "No, I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone or to ask for your sympathy. I'm telling you because I believe in honesty, and because this community deserves to know when people are trying to manipulate and deceive them." I pulled out a folder I'd brought with me. You see, this wasn't just about my wife having an affair. This was about three people working together to systematically destroy my family and my business, so they could profit from the pieces. Beth was shaking her head, trying to signal me to stop, but I was just getting started. Candace Morrison convinced my wife to take a job at her company, then helped her hide money in secret accounts. She encouraged Beth to have an affair, provided advice on how to manipulate me, and even helped plan how to get the maximum settlement in a divorce. I held up printed emails and bank statements. My brother John, meanwhile, was feeding information about our family business to competitors, trying to sabotage Mitchell Electric so that Beth would have grounds to claim I was a poor provider. The crowd was completely silent now. Even the teenagers had stopped texting to listen. And Beth, my wife of 18 years, the mother of my children, was recording our private conversations, documenting everything I said and did, building a case to paint me as an abusive husband so she could get full custody of our daughters and alimony payments. I looked directly at Beth, who had gone pale. The only problem with their plan was that they underestimated me. They thought I was just a small-town electrician who would roll over and let them take everything I'd worked for. They forgot that small-town electricians know how to solve problems. I handed the microphone back to the mayor and walked off the stage. The crowd erupted in conversation, people turning to stare at Beth, Candace, and John, who were trying to pack up their table and leave as quickly as possible. But I wasn't done yet. I intercepted them in the parking lot behind the square, where John was loading boxes into his car with shaking hands. "That was quite a performance," Candace said, trying to maintain her composure. "But you can't prove any of those accusations." "Actually, I can." I held up a flash drive. "Emails, bank records, recorded phone conversations, everything you three have been planning for the last 6 months. You recorded us illegally," Beth said. "I recorded conversations in my own home, with my own equipment, involving my own wife, perfectly legal in this state." John slammed the trunk of his car. "What do you want, James? I want you to leave, all three of you. Pack up and get out of my town." "Your town," Candace laughed. "You don't own this place." "No, but I've lived here my whole life. I employ half the contractors, I know every business owner, And after today, everyone knows exactly what kind of people you are. You can't force us to leave, Beth said, but her voice lacked conviction. I don't have to force you. You'll leave on your own, because staying will be too uncomfortable. I looked at each of them in turn. John, you've already lost most of your work. After today, you won't get any more jobs in this county. Candace, your company's reputation just took a major hit. How long before your boss decides you're more trouble than you're worth? And Beth, well, good luck finding another corporate job when your references include destroyed her family for personal gain. You're destroying your own children's mother, Beth said desperately. No, you did that when you chose Candace's advice over your family. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing in the parking lot. Behind me, I could hear them arguing, blaming each other, their careful alliance falling apart under pressure. By evening, the story had spread throughout the county. Social media was buzzing with accounts of what had happened at the festival. Beth's employer called her Monday morning and suggested she might be happier working somewhere else. Candace's company launched an internal investigation into her conduct. John's landlord gave him 30 days' notice. Within a month, all three of them had left town. Beth moved to Chicago, where she got a job with a marketing firm that didn't bother checking local references. Candace relocated to Denver and started her own consulting business. John drifted south. Last I heard, he was working construction in Texas. The divorce was finalized 6 months later. I kept the house, the business, and primary custody of the girls. Beth got her freedom, which was apparently all she'd really wanted anyway. I never remarried. Some wounds heal, but they leave scars that remind you to be more careful next time. The girls visit their mother during school breaks, and we've all learned to live with the new normal. Mitchell Electric is busier than ever. Turns out that people appreciate honesty and loyalty, even in business relationships. I've hired 2 new electricians and bought a bigger truck. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working in my garage, I think about that text message that started everything. I want an open marriage. This isn't negotiable. Ontrin. I still think my response was perfect. Understood. Because I did understand, finally. I understood that some people will take everything you give them and still want more. I understood that loyalty and hard work don't guarantee anything except the satisfaction of knowing you did your best. And I understood that sometimes, when people try to destroy your life, the best response isn't anger or revenge. Sometimes the best response is simply to let them show everyone exactly who they really are. The truth has a way of winning in